I'm gonna get started. And yeah, you might have seen there, this will be about an hour and 20 minutes. The run is actually longer than that, but there's sped up sections because there are long waits. I'll try my best to explain at least generally what happens, but I'm not going to go super in depth in terms of like technical detail because there won't be time to explain everything as it happens. But right now I need to die to set out a shade, which is why I'm taking all this damage. And you actually have to quit out here because the tick or the Krala doesn't respawn if you don't, so you need to bring him back. That's not a pause storage, that was just a super slide. So, you get bad float, you need to parry attacks from this shade, you cannot damage the shade yet, you need it to stay alive for later. And then with bad float you can get up here. And you need to go all the way over into this side room to bring out the other Vengeful, because there's actually not enough things to pogo in this room to make it to the top, even with float. So you need to add the Vengeful, and then there's just barely enough things that you can pogo. But then you need bad float again, so you have to come back down, get bad float a second time, and then you can go back up. And I wait to kill it there on a parry because you actually get slightly more height from the pogo if you parry and kill it at the same time. And you need that little extra bit of height. And then you pogo literally everything available, and you just barely make it up. Well, it's technically not lag, because, I mean, this is a TAS, it's running at a perfect 100 frames per second the entire time, but it's for the freeze frames, I assume. I haven't actually looked into why, but I assume it's the freeze frames. And I guess what I said isn't true. There are intentional places where the TAS drops frames in this, but not until later. Yeah. Get used to Dirtmouth, by the way. The first 40 minutes of the run kind of revolve around it. And yeah, if you ever have any questions throughout any of this, just ask and I will be happy to answer to the best of my abilities. This room is actually like... This room causes a ton of problems because you can't leave it either to the right or to the left without a shade. So you need to die and set up a shade to get across it. But there are times when you need shades in other rooms, and you can't get to those other rooms if you put a shade in them, because then you don't have a shade in this first turn to get past it. So that first room of Crossroads actually causes, like, 90% of the problems with getting to Vengeful Spirit. It's, like, the root of all issues. And so the first thing we're doing here is we're collecting grubs, which might seem weird, but we need to get float before we can get Vengeful Spirit. And one of the ways to get float before you have Vengeful Spirit is through mask shards, so we're collecting grubs so that we can get a mask shard from Grubfather later. And here I'm just waiting for this fly to get an aggro range. So this is the start of some of the more complicated aspects. I'm dunking into these spikes to start a room dupe. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. It's just going to look really weird. But it basically allows me to traverse rooms quickly and it also means there's 2 rooms loaded at all times now. And so I'm moving over to this grub that you just saw on the top left briefly, so that I can collect it. But first I need both of the rooms to be that grub room. So right now only one of them is. Once I go through this load, now both of the rooms are this grub room. And so now I can collect it, and then I get 2 grubs instead of 1. And now I'm making my way back to where I came from. Except now I'm actually going to, once I get over here, I'm going to add a 3rd room to the dupe. Because I want 5 grubs and there's only 2 around here. So I get 2 grubs from that first one. And then here I add a 3rd room to the dupe, and then I go to the 2nd grub and I get it 3 times. So then I have 5 total, and that's enough for a mask shard. And yeah, I made inventory more transparent and made the camera follow the night out of bounds to make it so you can actually see what's going on. Normally the camera would not be on the night for most of this. And so now I'm coming down towards this grub that is by the stag station. Once again, I'm not going to collect it right away, because right now only 2 of the 3 rooms are that grub, and I want all 3 of the rooms to be that grub. So I need to do some more movement through this room dupe to make all 3 of the rooms be the grub. And now all 3 rooms are the grub room. And so I go in here and I collect it, and now I have 5 grubs. Now we need to get around the part that I was talking about earlier, where you need a shade to get through this room. So we're gonna do that. But then we're going to set our bench to a different room so that we don't have to go through this room anymore. Because this room is annoying because you need a shade, and we want our shade to be somewhere else. Yes, I did have bad float. That happens if you double-click in a specific way that this TAS does. It's not helpful at all here. You can't do anything with it, but yes, I did have bad float. And does it only clear one of the black blockers? I'm unsure why that stays black, honestly. I don't have the answer for you there. So yeah, now I need to get my shade to the Moloch, but I can't do that yet, because if I put my shade in the Moloch, I won't be able to go back to the Moloch. So I'm doing a wrong warp up to the top of this room. And then in a second here, you're going to notice these 2 cameras. The main camera is now following a tick-tick. The camera in the bottom left will stay on the night. The main camera is following a very important tick-tick. And so I'm just waiting for that tick-tick to get to a specific spot, and then I load the next room. And then the tick-tick appears on this wall, because I waited for him to get to that position. And now we wait for this tick-tick, because if you look in the player cam, I'm down all the way at Dirtmouth, and I need to get up these steps to sit on the bench. And I can't do that, because I can't jump. So, I bring the tick-tick over. And yeah, I sped this up because otherwise this is, I think, a 10-minute wait. And so the first trip you can only get up 1 step. So he has to do an entire another lap. All the way around. And then once he gets to us the second time, then we can make it up the rest of the steps. And so you'll notice I'm in this room dupe. This isn't what Dirtmouth normally looks like. So when I sit on this bench, the game doesn't think I'm in Dirtmouth. It thinks I'm in that other room. So I sit on the bench, and now my bench gets set to that other room, which means that when I die, I'll respawn in that other room, so I no longer need to use a shade to get past the first room of Crossroads. So that was the point of all of that. So first I'm just going to remove the room dupe by going up the well. And so now I'm out of the room dupe. And now you'll see a demonstration of what happens when I die now. Which is that I respawn in that room, but since it doesn't have a bench, I just respawn at my current coordinates, which is down here. And so here I just go to unlock Cornifer's shop, because I'm going to need that later. So that was my brief detour that I'm doing here. And then now that I've unlocked Cornifer's shop, I'm going back to that room that I just respawned in. But I want to respawn really high up, so I'm going to this fungal waste room, which is quite tall. And then if I die in this acid, that's high enough up that I'm up at the top of this room. Now we start a room dupe, and in that room dupe we go down towards where Brooding Moloch is. And we're not going to fight Brooding Moloch, we're just going to get Brooding Moloch to kill us as we load another room. The reason we do that is because I need to die while I was in that last room, but if I died while I was in that last room, I'd be soft locked because I wouldn't respawn in a usable location. So I needed to load a different room so that I could be in a different position when I respawned. And now that I've done that, I can fight Brooding Moloch. And so the reason I died in a room dupe there is because normally the shade spawns too far away, but in the room dupe you can get the shade to spawn right here, and then I can use it to pogo and reach the mask shard. Now you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute. If you can just get a mask shard here, why did you bother getting the grubs? Since you can just get this mask shard and now you have float. Well, this float, I can't get Vengeful Spirit yet, because I need to have P float. And the second condition is I need my bench to be in Ancestral mound. And right now my bench is in that tall room. So the point of this float is just to unlock the Dirtmouth elevator, which might seem entirely unrelated, but you actually need the Dirtmouth elevator, and then you can get past the first room of Crossroads without jumping and without a shade. So this float isn't to get Vengeful Spirit yet. It's just to unlock the elevator. You missed a section of tick-tick walking. There is more tick-ticks coming up. How much manipulation? I didn't do too much. I just got a good start and then went with it, because, like, I didn't have any way to predict how it would continue after the start. Thank you for the sub, Jen. So I just kind of went with what I got. If it started taking forever, then I went back and redid the start and hoped it went better, but yeah. I didn't do a ton of manipulation. And so this is actually why I needed to unlock Cornifer's room, because right now I'd be soft-locked, but because you can still go through interaction doors, I can go into Cornifer's house, and then I'm no longer soft-locked. Now I sit on my bench, so it's back at Dirtmouth. It's not in the tall room anymore. And now that I have the Dirtmouth elevator, I can get past the first room in Crossroads. And that might seem like it makes no sense. Why would the elevator help? But in a little bit, you'll see why. I just need to collect some Geo first. Or actually, no, sorry, not collecting Geo yet. First, I'm just dying. I forgot about this part. Thank you for the sub 5. That was bad float, Jen. It's not helpful in this case. Yeah, sorry, I was forgetting that before I showed off the elevator. First I come over to Grubfather, and I'm not getting the mask yet because I have no way to jump into it, but I'm getting him to spawn the mask. Because if I don't spawn the mask now, then he'll spawn it in a room dupe later, which screws me over. So I need him to spawn the mask now. And I'm collecting all this money. I can't actually use any of it because I'm going to die too many times before it's helpful. But, yeah. Thank you for the sub, Alex. It's appreciated. I did not RNG minute wahas and wheeze. So now, you might have noticed this before, now it's going to be especially noticeable. All these enemies are frozen. The reason all these enemies are frozen is because the camera shouldn't be following the knight. It should be down at the bottom of this room right now. And enemies activate based on distance to the camera, not distance to the knight. So since the camera is technically far away right now, all these enemies are deactivated. Only the enemies from the bottom of the room are activated right now. So you can see like that grubs is activated because he was at the bottom of the room, which is where the camera is supposed to be. Can you do some insane wrong warps with TAS? Yes. I think the biggest TAS wrong warp I've ever done is in this TAS, just coming up later. It's hard to find useful massive wrong warps, but they do exist. And so now I need to die in the very bottom right corner of where you can in this room, and that will put a shade in the Grubfather room, and then I can use that shade to pogo into the mask shard. Because normally you can't die in Grubfather room, so you have to die in a room dupe that the game thinks is Grubfather room. Now I believe I collect Geo, yes. So even though I just got 100 Geo from Grubfather, I had to die to set my shade there. It wasn't useful Geo to me, so I have to collect other Geo. Now I get to use the elevator. So, the reason I have this elevator is because you can just barely make a room dupe work to get past the first room of Crossroads without needing a shade. And so you can start a room dupe up here in Crystal Peaks. And so now I'm in 2 times Dirtmouth. And then if I go down the well, at first it seems like I can't get anywhere, but then you'll notice there is the return of Tick Tick Cam. If you look at the player cam, I cannot get past this ledge. I have no way past this little floating platform. But if I wait for the Tick Tick, then I can get past this little platform. So once again, a Tick Tick saves the day. I haven't named the Tick Ticks. I figured they probably should be named, but I haven't named them. Also, this one I decided to spare his life because I felt bad that I kept killing them all after all these journeys. So, like, it would be technically better to not take the 2 damage tanks and only damage tank once. but I decided that I was only gonna pogo him once so I could spare his life because I felt bad. So then once you're past there, you can super slide, get into this room, and then that removes the room dupe. And now, after like 10 minutes of waiting for a tick-tick, I'm past the first room of Crossroads without needing a shade. So that was the entire point of all of that, was just to get past the first room of Crossroads. And so now that I didn't need a shade to do that, my shade is still at Grubfather, where I'm gonna need it later. And now, as I mentioned before, my bench has to be at Ancestral Mound when I have float, so that's what I'm gonna go do now. I'm going to go set my bench to Ancestral Mound. They're not an upslash because I'm collecting the Geo gem. If I upslash and walk past, then I wouldn't get the Geo. Hey, Glunky. And so this is just a slightly modified room dupe that the any percent run does to get to Ancestral Mound. I am making a pit stop here to kill this guy because I need the Geo. But then I return to the room dupe. And in a second I'm gonna go to bounds and heal. That's because I need the health, but it's also because I need to wait for an enemy to move inside the room dupe. Anyone who's familiar with the any percent room dupe will notice that normally this enemy I'm about to see isn't here, but because I waited out of bounds for a bit, he walked far enough that I could use him to get up this set of steps. Yeah, exactly, and now he won't eat my jumps. And now, similarly to the Mask Shard, I'm spawning Vengeful Spirit now, because if I don't spawn it now, it'll cause problems later, but I can't collect it yet. But now my bench is there. And now I need to get back to Grubfather, and there's no way for me to go up, so I actually have to go down and through Fungal Wastes, so that I can take a stag station back to Dirtmouth, because there's no way for me to go upwards. And so in a second here, I'm about to wrong warp into Fog Canyon. So everything will be a bit messy for a second. But now I'm in Fog Canyon in a room dupe. And I just need to get to Archives, so that I can get rid of the room dupe. So now the room dupe's gone, and now I just need to go grab the stag, but first I need some more money, because I do not have enough. There's very slim pickings for Geo on the way. This is on patch 1028. Yes, perfect Geo. And so now, luckily there's an elevator here, and we're back at Dirtmouth. So all that wrong warp and going through Fungal and Fog Canyon, that was all just to get back up to Dirtmouth. And now that I'm here, I have to get past the first room of Crossroads again. So, I have to do this room dupe again. Because there's no other way past other than using a shade. Why do you go down and up? Because that's how you get across the well. I could have... Like, yeah, it's just to get across the well. You can't bench float because Because your bench needs to stay at Ancestral Mound. And, once again, we wait for the tick-tick. Now, you may notice, that this gets me to the right side of this room. And I want to be going left to go to get the Grubfather, but there's no way across the left side, so I have to go to the right and then go all the way around through a route in Crossroads that gets me back towards Grubfather. And this is the last tick-tick waiting section. So yeah, altogether, if it wasn't sped up, it was about 19 minutes of tick-tick waiting altogether. See, Jen, this time they're up slashes, because I don't care about the GF. RTA run when? I will never be doing this run RTA. It's just not gonna happen. Maybe RTA segmented, but I would need help from other people. I'm not doing that by myself. I made this TAS. I spent 4 years working on this project. I've done my part. I've done my time. I did a segmented RTA run of the 2-jump route a long time ago, before 0 jump was solved. But it was never good enough that I wanted to upload it. But yeah, like before TAS tools existed, I did a 2-jump segmented RTA run. And that actually did involve one of the like 10-minute tick-tick waits into hoping you get the pogo. This section would also be hell RTA, climbing this without float. It was bad enough tassing it. I think this and King's Pass would be like just insane to do RTA. This might be more annoying than difficult, but just waiting for like a perfect grubs forever. But King's Pass would be like, it just requires so much. Everything else could be split up into smaller segments that are at least feasible. If you do this in KP, you'll do the rest. I mean, I'd be willing to do... If you do King's Pass, then I would like to start like a project with whoever is interested in, like, you know, give a week, and whoever does this segment the fastest gets to be that segment in the run. It'd be fun to do that kind of project, but it would require King's Pass to be done. KP can be segmented each death? Yeah, but everything hard is after the death. There's only the one death. And, like, the hard part is after that. I did consider speeding this part up, but, like, I don't know, it didn't feel worth it. Most of the weights aren't too bad, and it just felt like it would be a bit choppy. And then after that climb, make it up to Grubfather. And the Mass Charge comes back. We use the Shade to get float with it. We don't kill the Shade, because we need it. I have to leave the room because I'm invincible otherwise, but now I use the Shade to kill me as I load this next room. So I die in the load zone here. And and then I respawn an Ancestral Mound where my bench is, but the grubs drop room is also loaded, and then I can use the float from the bench to get off the ground, and then I can pogo things. The reason I need float here is because I'm invincible right now, so I can't just damage tank and then pogo because I'm invincible. So I need to use float to sit on the bench to get me very slightly off the ground, and then I can pogo things. And then we have Vengeful Spirit. You might think Vengeful Spirit kind of is, oh, it's over, you can float now whenever you want. Not really. It's still hard after you have Vengeful Spirit, because Vengeful Spirit isn't upwards movement. Vengeful Spirit is just anti-downwards movement. So we still don't really have a way to move upwards, which you can tell by the fact that in order to get back to Dirtmouth, I am still gonna go back to Fog Canyon and stag to Dirtmouth, because I can't get up, even with Vengeful Spirit. Because it's just, Vengeful Spirit is just stop going down. It's not up. You don't have a way to move upwards, really, until you get Dive. Isn't upwards movement in this patch? No, it's not with Vengeful Spirit. There's very, very select places that you can move up with Vengeful Spirit, and we will use them, but they're very, very limited. Yeah, on 1-2-2-1 and upwards, you can move upwards with Vengeful Spirit, but this patch doesn't have it. And now, I will say, this section is extremely lucky. Like, the fact that you can do dash, which is what we're working towards right now, without jumping, is pure luck. This section had half presses in it, which meant that I had to hold the A button from a previous jump in order to use slopes. Because slopes behave differently when you're holding A versus when you're not. So if you're holding A and you hit a slope, you'll maintain momentum from it, and you can actually keep upwards movement. But if you're not holding A, as soon as you stop touching the slope, you stop moving upwards. But, by pure luck, if you've never pressed the A button yet, since a quit out, it treats it as if you're holding A. And so, because we never pressed A, it treats it as if I'm holding A, and bam, there we go, I'm moving upwards. So there's a very small amount of places in this game where you can do that. They're basically all elevators. Basically anywhere that there's an elevator, you can get upwards movement from it, but no, like, ground seams don't work, ledges don't work, nothing else works. It's just elevators, basically, and slopes. And so there's multiple points here where I use that elevator, and then in a second, I use a slope here to move upwards. And then again here. Normally you would stop moving when you hit the wall, but because it treats it as if you're holding A, you keep moving upwards. And so there are those 3 spots in order to get to dash that you need to be holding A. And so I thought that I was going to have to come up with something totally different to get here, because I was like, okay, well, I don't have any jump presses up until this point anymore, so I can't just hold a jump press from earlier, so I'm screwed. I can't do this, because I'm not holding A, so none of this is going to work properly. But just by pure luck, the game treats it as if you're holding A, as long as you've never pressed A before. And so I just totally lucked out, and it still works. And so now I'm going to go get dash, except I can't actually get dash yet, because there's a ledge on the way to Hornet, so I can't get to Hornet. So instead of going to Hornet, I'm going to go under the level here, with some sliding float. And then I'm going to die to this acid. And then I'm going to be back in Dirtmouth. And now, we go all the way back. But first we have to collect some soul. So yeah, as you can see, even though I have the ability to float whenever I want, it's still not exactly easy to do things. It still takes quite a bit of effort to do a lot of things that would normally be very basic. So once again, we go through all of this. And, you might be thinking that, oh, why are you getting dash if it takes this long to get? Like, surely you could go get dive first if dive allows you to move easier. You can make it to dive without dash. That's true. And dash definitely doesn't save time on the way to dive. But, if you go to dive without dash, then you run into an issue, which is that you can't escape Soulmaster's Arena without dash. You need dash. Just do a single dash to escape Soulmaster's Arena. And that's the only reason I'm getting dash right now. Because otherwise I'd be soft locked there. There are no down dashes in this run, Jenkar, because you cannot equip Dash Master, because you cannot equip Charms without pressing the jump button. So there are no charms. On patches from... No, you can't. So, you can't use Enter until 1.3 or later. That was introduced in later patches. It doesn't exist on 1.028. You also can't buy things from shops on this patch. You used to get one of the mask shards from Sly, because it was a much easier route to get a mask shard from Sly instead of from Brooding Moloch. But because you can't buy things from shops without pressing jump, I had to use Brooding Moloch instead. And so then we've come back, we use the Shade to get to Hornet, and now I have Slow Fall Float, which means I need to get rid of that ASAP because the fight would suck if I kept it. I think there is another Shade spawn Staxis, but somehow that spot is still the closest to the acid where I died. Or maybe there isn't another Shade spawn, but luckily that acid death works to spawn the Shade there. The ETA on this, it's... I can just look. Okay, so we're about 37 minutes in. It's an hour and 18 minutes total. So you got another, like, 40 minutes. This is the wrong warp, 5-brain, by the way, if you want to see a cool one. And then that's the end of the wrong warp. So it's chained wrong warp all the way from the room where Cornifer is until the Gomes room. And now, the reason I did this room dupe is because I needed to get past Grubs' mother. So now I just did a room dupe that took me to underneath. So I didn't have to fight, because Grubs' mother has that little lip before the arena, and I can't get past that, so I did room dupe. Also, yeah, we pop into Sly, but I'm pissed that he didn't let me buy from his shop without pressing the jump button, so I don't save him. I just leave him there. He wouldn't let me buy. Unless I press the jump button. We even go to see him a second time here. Because I needed to collect soul and get float. And I use his room to do that. I'm very excited to get the Soul Sanctum. Soul Sanctum is my favorite part of this run by far. No, I don't use the jump button to advance text. I use the nail button and the focus button. and enter on some menus, I don't press the jump button in any way for any reason throughout the entire TAS. It is never pressed. In any context. I didn't want to just say no jumping, because that felt too ambiguous to me. You cannot press the jump button for any reason. No super slide because I need this Vengeful 5 brain. Because I can't get past the next room without a death dupe. And now we're in City of Tears. Yeah, it's the main menu storage dupe, but without main menu storage. Yeah, it used to be an any percent, all glitches. So yeah, now we're going to Soul Sanctum so we can get dive from Soul Master. And Vengeful Spirit was the most complicated part of the run routing-wise. But in terms of, like, technical execution of complicated glitches, Soul Sanctum is by far the most complicated. Because it's so much upwards movement throughout rooms that don't have much to use. And so it just results in this crazy sequence you're about to see. So you start with a room dupe. And use these elevators. I only called the first one down to get it out of the way. Get elevator storage, and then I can use the elevator to clip down into the load zone I want here. So now I'm in double this room. It's elevator up here. Get elevator storage on this elevator. Send it down so I can use it to clip up over here. Elevator up here. And then I'm stuck, so I have to go back now. Go back down this room. And now, I have to kill this guy, because the load zone I want to hit is behind another load zone that I have to super slide past. So you have to super slide past the first load zone so you don't activate it, and then hit the second load zone. And now you're up in Soul Sanctum, but you're in the wrong part of it, so you need to get to the top, so clearly, you just do a nice wrong warp into here, like so, and kill Soul Warrior. Now, I have to get rid of the room dupe. So I need to set my bench over here. Now, similar to before, the game does not think this is the correct room, so when I sit on this bench, it sets my bench to the farthest right room of Soul Sanctum, not where the bench actually is. So you sit on the bench, and now I need to go die so they can remove the room dupe, because deaths remove room dupes. But it's really hard to die in a place that doesn't soft lock you with that bench. Like, if I died basically anywhere here, I'd just be soft locked. So, I have to go back through Soul Sanctum. No look down bench. I was on 1 HP, which makes look downs not work. So yeah, back through Soul Sanctum. Once again, wrong warp to the top. Guy's dead this time. But now, if I go back, he'll respawn because it thinks I'm in a different room, so it puts him back, and then I use him to die. Because this is the only spot in the entire room dupe where you can die and not softlock. Now that I'm out of the room dupe, I have more freedom to go die somewhere else. So, I come over here, and I die to this guy. And now, finally, I am at the top of this room, and that's the end of the insanity. That is by far, like, the most complicated part of this entire TAS. And that's over now. And so now, we have to fight Soul Master. Without jumping. Now, fighting without jumping is a bit annoying, because he spends a lot of time in the air. So what we do is we get float, and then we fight him up here. Now, you might notice this means I'm not using Vengeful Spirit, because if I used Vengeful Spirit, I would lose float. But this is still... This is the best way I could find to kill him. And yeah, the fireball at the start was getting this float. Yeah, no, there are no more tick-tick cams. Once we have dive, we have too much power. We don't need tick-ticks anymore. And that's the other reason for float, is you have to end the fight mid-air, because the pickup is mid-air, so you need to make sure you're high enough to grab it when the fight ends. Same thing here. You'll notice in a bit I get float. Because I need to make sure I end the fight high enough that I can actually get the pickup. And now finally we have the ability to move upwards, because if you dive from the ground, you start by going upwards so that you can slam down, and so if you cancel the dive during the upwards part, you just keep going upwards forever. And yeah, that's why you need dash, is just to escape that one little area. Now, there is a downside to dive float, which is that you can't stop moving upwards unless you take damage or override it with a different type of float. And I don't have a different type of float right now. So basically, I have no way to stop moving upwards once I start unless I leave the room or take damage. Yeah, those iframes were pretty scuffed, I think. Also, now we can finally get our shade back. Spend so much of the run without having a full soul meter, and now we finally have it. And you'll notice here, I come into this room and I immediately leave it again. It's because right now I have invincibility, and I need to get rid of the invincibility. So, I had to leave the room so that I got rid of the invincibility so I could take damage there. Because like I said, there's no way to stop moving upwards once you start unless you take damage. Now, we go, for the third time, we go through Howling Cliffs to get the green path. Because now I'm going to get Great Slash. And I'll explain why in a second. I'm just going to do an aside quickly. There's a few rooms like this one right now, where the only way to go through it is by falling way to the bottom of the map and then dive floating back up. These rooms are boring, so I tried to avoid them as much as I could, but they still do happen. So just, you know, there's a few places where like the old RTA segmented run did this, that I managed to avoid with the TAS, but there are some rooms where like this is just the only possible way. So unfortunately there's some rooms like that. I tried to avoid them as much as possible. But back to why we're getting Great Slash. I mentioned earlier that the only way to get rid of dive float was to either take damage or to override it with a different type of float. The useful way to do that is to override it with slow fall float. Normally you would get slow fall float from using Vengeful Spirit, but since you can't cast spells while you have dive float, that's not an option. So you get Great Slash for slow fall float, and you can use Great Slash in order to stop moving upwards. And so it's actually, like, it's very crucial that you get Great Slash. You can't do a lot of things without it. Great Slash is like, one of the most crucial pieces of movement that this TAS has. Dive and Great Slash. Staxis, that platform just has a gap that's big enough to just walk through.
To sta cucando.
So now we've unlocked most of like our movement. We can do most of the things we're going to be able to do. The next thing that we collect is Mantis Claw, which might seem strange for a run that never presses the jump button, but it allows us to do two things, because it allows you to wall cling. So the wall clinging allows you to do wall cling storage, which is fun, but it does not nearly make up for the detour that it takes to get Mantis Claw, because without jumping, wall cling storage is actually, like, you can't chain it, so it's not amazing. But the reason we need Mantis Claw is because Monomon is extremely annoying. Like, the geometry to get to Monomon is extremely annoying, and even with dive, we can't do it, because it's a U shape, so you need to go down and then up without a floor to jump off of with dive. So we have no way to move up. So we need Mantis Claw, because Mantis Claw and the combination of C-Dash allow us to navigate that U shape, and you'll see why later when we get there. But basically, it might seem weird that we're getting Mantis Claw if we never press the jump button, but it is mandatory. You have to get Mantis Claw. Jenker, I was standing on the floor of the acid. That it takes long enough to activate that you can just sink all the way to the bottom before it hits you. It's funny. And now we're on our way to get C-Dash. But first we need to collect some soul from down here. Because we will need it, be needing it. This is one of these rooms. There is no way through this room with the abilities that I have. No dupe. No dupe. And then this room's funny because when you enter a room with dive, this happens, where you get stuck in this animation, so I can just use this to get across this giant gap. And then cancel it when I want to be able to control myself again. I have also, when I was rendering this, I had a desync where the TAS somehow, I wasn't paying attention, but like I came back to look at how the encoding was going, and the TAS was fighting the Crystal Guardian there, and I have no idea how it managed to do that, but it was doing a very bad job of it, because, you know, the TAS didn't know it was fighting the Crystal Guardian, so it just got killed by it. But it was entertaining to walk into that happening. Oh yeah, also, weird quirk of conveyor belts there. You'll notice I started a dive really early on that conveyor belt, but it didn't actually move me upwards until later. Apparently if you start a dive on a conveyor belt, you don't do the upwards part. And so, if you go off a conveyor belt mid-start of a dive, then you, like, get slid off the conveyor belt and then start moving upwards, only after you stop touching the conveyor belt. It's really strange. You don't need wall cling storage to get the C dash there, but it is convenient. It's much faster than the other way. Other way is slow fall, yeah. This dark room is also kind of neat. This part just barely worked. The fly luckily shoots that in time for you to save yourself with it. It was very lucky. There are other ways to that room, if you need them, but they require taking damage, and I didn't have the health to do that. Crystallized Mound is also one of my favorite rooms in this TAS. It is very satisfying. Descending Dark, yeah, it's just for speed for Umu and for THK. The RTA run did it for invulnerability for Umu, because the Umu fights really hard without jumping, even with dive. And so if you have D-Dark, you can get invulnerability for the fight, and then you don't have to worry about that. But the TAS just gets it for speed reasons. Because it's pretty much on the way. So D-Dark can give you invulnerability in the same room you're in. Dive can only give you invulnerability after you transition into another room. And since the room with Umu in it is a downwards transition, if you try to transition into it with dive storage, you just dive into the room and you lose the invulnerability. So D-Dark allows you to get invulnerability in the room with Umu with it, and you can't do that with dive. No, you can't use spells. So if you were gonna do that strat for Umu, you would kill Umu with C-Dash. What was that? Do you mean the walking in place? It was me having slow fall and dive float, and the game trying to move me into the correct. Oh! How did I gain height the second time? So by canceling the slow fall float, by hard falling and then turning around. It cancels the slow fall, it doesn't cancel the dive float, so the slow fall goes away and the dive float takes priority again. C dash does hit THK, yes. And we are now on our return visit to City of Tears. No, I will not have invulnerability for THK. C-dash invuln THK for all skills. Yeah, so that was a theory way back, but the screams remove the invulnerability, which makes it very annoying. So it doesn't last the whole fight unless you get it multiple times. It just didn't seem to really work. This guy is how I, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm not dying here, I have invulnerability right here because I entered with dive storage. But, yeah, I just lured that guy over so I could super slide out. I've been Simoed? Oh no. The TAS is gonna fail. Yeah. So that's how you get up to Lurian. And now I just take a quick detour, collect some Geo. I'll be needing it later. I got this much Geo, and it's not quite enough. But I was like, oh, surely I'll just collect... I think I needed 8 more Geo, and I was like, oh, surely I'll just collect 8 more Geo on the way. How hard could that be? And then that just didn't happen, and so I had to get like an extra Geo Rock and be stent, but, you know. It's all good. And there's our first Dreamer kill. Is C-Dash Dreamer faster than Cyclone Dreamer? I would imagine, yeah. What was that? That was me using C-Dash to kill the Dreamer. I considered the dupe. I tried to do the room dupe with dive, like using dive as the way to jump up into the load zone, but it didn't work. But I tried. Now, I'm gonna stag to Dirtmouth here, and I'm on my way to Monmon. You might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, don't you have Queen Stag? Why don't you stag Queen Stag? And the answer is because I'm dumb. So, I originally stagged to Dirtmouth because I just forgot that I had Queen Stag, because I tasked that part so long ago, and I just didn't read the menu. And then I realized, and I timed it, and I was like, oh, holy crap, Dirtmouth is actually faster anyway, because the 2 rooms you have to go through after Queen Stag are really slow. And I was like, oh, I guess Dirtmouth's faster anyway somehow, that's crazy. And then I realized that when I timed it, I was timing it as if the wall to Monomon hadn't been broken yet, and it had been, and that, drastically changes the speed. So Queen Stag would be faster, but I cast it, was like, oh crap, went back to change it and realized, oh no, this is faster. And then later, again, realized, oh wait, the door was open. And by that point, the TAS had moved forward so much that I didn't go back to change it. But it's also, it's only, 10 seconds slower to go from Dirtmouth or something. It's surprisingly not that slow. Oh yeah, there's so much free time save on this task if someone wants to, if someone wants to do a better one. I did get an extra attack on Umu. I did try to manipulate the RNG to change that, but like it wouldn't cooperate with me, so I just went with it. Again, time is a very secondary purpose of this task. And this is why I need C-Dash. So, if you start a wall cling C-Dash, and then cancel it with quick map, then you start falling very slowly. You can't move left or right, you just fall straight down. And then, when I release C-Dash under here, I start moving upwards again. And that's the only way to get past this section. And so that's why you need Claw, and that's why you need C-Dash. Those are the only reasons you get those items. Is to get around that little lip. Teleport glitch works there? No, because then how would you move upwards? There's plenty of ways to get across sideways. The problem is moving upwards after you get across sideways. And that's not an option there. No, so diving out of the acid doesn't work, I believe. I remember I definitely tested Isma's for this route, and I can't remember whether you just can't dive float out of acid, or if Isma's was like extremely slow or impossible. I can't remember, but all I remember is that C-Dash and Claw were the way to go. C-Dash hit on THK RTA when? I've done that. I've used C-Dash to kill THK. But it's just not great. But I've done that in runs before, in really old all skills runs. And so we have to do this C-Dash thing once again. Luckily this tube lines up with somewhere you can drop. Yeah, so you could death warp to Monomon tank, but you'd have to... I can't remember if it works. I think it works NMMS, but it's like really, really, really slow. Save and quit not an option? Yeah, save and quit's an option, but you just save and quit back to Monomon. Yeah, so dunk was to get rid of slow fall, so that I could see Dash across the gap. I did try to do the room dupe through Queen's Gardens, but you can't do Thorn Jump without jumping, which you might be able to tell by the name, but you know. I thought it was worth a shot. I really wanted to try going down between those little thorn gaps below this platform, but then I realized you'd have to go back up. But it looks like the hitbox might be small enough that you could go into that little gap, which would be really fun, even if it would be pointless. And this is the last dive float out of bounds room. One last boring room. Also, you might notice on the way out of Beastem, I kind of learned more about, yeah, to get around the toll. That is why. But I learned some new things about how wall-cling storage super slides work as I was tassing the Beastem exit. And, like, there's way more ways to use and start them than I originally thought, and way more ways to get, like, different amounts of speed out of them. They're, like, more complicated than I originally thought. And so I kind of went crazy with them on the Beastem exit, which you'll see later, but it's fun. Just by canceling the slow fall, Jinkar. Hard fall and turn. It's used throughout the run a fair amount. And you'll notice here, wait. Yeah, I had a little bit of fun with the wall-cling storage slides there. It's made me want to go relook at some of the any % sections, now that I've learned a lot more about them. Because, like, they're so much more usable than I originally thought. I thought they were very limited when you could use them, but, like, you can have wall-cling storage on either side, and then slide in either direction with either side of wall-cling storage, and depending on how you do it and which way you're facing and what type of wall you hit and when, you get different speed and different... There's a lot more to them than I thought, and I think they'd be useful. Oh yeah, there was a run that did failed champ with C-Dash. I forgot about that. Yeah, probably all bosses base game. And here we go. About to fight THK. You'll notice the single, the single VS is because you can't dive during the screams or else you'll just get dive float. So anytime I need to, like, cast a spell during a scream because I'm maxing out my soul, I just have to cast a VS. And it just does, like, pitiful VS damage, but it's better than swinging a straight nail. And there you go. Hollow Knight beaten without pressing the jump button a single time for any reason. Yeah, it's I'm super stoked to have this be done. It's I've been working on this for a long ass time. Like, about 4 years ago is when I started routing this. And then it was like, it got down to like 2 jumps about 2 years ago. And then like 1 jump, and then 0 jump got solved like route-wise about a year ago. And then now finally a TAS exists. I'm super stoked. Jen, thank you for the 5 gift subs. It is very appreciated. Oh, and also for the gift sub to Valley. It will be put on YouTube. I'm not gonna do any special premiere or anything. But it will be on YouTube. Can I make a video with loads heated? Like, just remove the load screens entirely? It would require re-encoding the entire thing and maybe cause desyncs. And also, I don't think it would add as much as you think it might. Yeah. I appreciate everybody coming and watching and hanging out. I appreciate all the subs. I don't know what I'm gonna do now. I said I was gonna run NMG like a long time ago after I did this task. But, oh jeez, Valley, thank you for the 10 subs, Jesus. Holy crap. Yeah, I said I was gonna run an MG, but I'm kind of like... No, don't worry, I'm not gonna run an MMS. But it's been so long since I said I was gonna run an MG that I kind of lost the motivation to at this point. So I was gonna either do... Yeah, I was gonna maybe do an all skills, all glitches task with the 1028 route. Or maybe go back and try to, like, improve the any percent no main menu storage task, or just run an MG. I don't know. I'm kind of in a tassing mood recently, but I might want to try to do an all skills all glitches task because I don't think there's no all glitches tasks, are there yet?